Greetings, my saplings. Okay, so in today's video, we are going to be going over some tips and tricks for copying the Yeezy 350 V2 Butter. Now, specifically in these tips for copying videos, what we normally talk about is the online store list, this being first come first serves, or if it's a queue, then some tips and tricks for those stores. Additionally, we also discuss some raffles and how to get multiple entries into those raffles to increase your chances to the fullest extent possible. And finally, at the end of today's video, we are going to be specifically talking about the application releases. This being, of course, the foot stores and some other ones that we'll get into. Okay, so to kick it off, we're obviously going to be talking about the online store list first. And the first store I wanted to mention, because this is a pretty big deal actually, is Yeezy Supply. Yeezy Supply actually has a set time now. If you guys have been copying Yeezys with me, or just in general for the past few months or even years, you guys know that Yeezy Supply has always been random. However, now they have a set time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time. Now, I don't really think this is a good thing, because I, for one, was able to find out when it would go live, no matter what time it was, because I would follow Yeezy Mafia on Twitter with notifications, or even Soul Links on Twitter with notifications. But now, everyone knows what time it's going to be at, so there's definitely going to be a lot more competition, which really sucks. So the only advice I would give you guys for Yeezy Supply is definitely just be as fast as possible, and for this you have to use autofill. Moving on to the next release at around, because not exactly, but around 10 a.m. Eastern time, Adidas.com will open up their splash page, and evidently for Adidas.com, 99% of you guys already know what we're doing. We're using the multiple people jig. Essentially, you just need to create a bunch of Chrome users and open up one tab for the splash page on each of those Chrome users, because Adidas.com tracks your cookies, meaning that if you open up multiple tabs on the same Chrome user, you have the same cookies, so you will get banned. But if you have different Chrome users, they all have unique cookies, so then you have a much greater chance of actually getting in. Now, if you want me to go more in depth into this, check out this video right here. I'm not going to be talking about it step by step in this video, just because I feel like it's a little insulting to some of my subscribers who've seen it over and over again, and it just sounds really redundant. So just check out this video if you don't know what I'm talking about. Now, one thing I really did want to emphasize, occasionally we've been getting these errors where you see there's been a security issue identified and you say, oh no, it's patched, it's patched. Don't worry guys, it's not patched. All you have to do for this is go on to history, click on show full history, then click on clear browsing data, set it for past 24 hours or even the past hour, clear the history, wipe everything out, and then just refresh the Adidas splash page and you're back to normal. It's very simple, guys. Now, moving on to some other first come first serve releases at 10 a.m. Eastern time on the dot. We have Foot Locker, Foot Action, and Champs. Now, we'll talk more about these stores a little later, but just to talk about the online release that is occurring, the only tips I would give you here is just to use autofill, just to make your checkout as quick as possible. And the hardest thing when it comes to these is simply adding to cart, just because there's so many bots that overrun these sites. So the best thing I would suggest to you guys is just keep spamming that add to cart button. And then Eastbay is essentially the same exact process, where you just have to keep trying and trying to add to cart. I've actually had more success off of Eastbay in comparison to the other three stores, but it's up to you which ones you want to focus on. Moving on to the next release, one that I actually like a little more. This is the Kicks USA release. Now, what Kicks USA always does, they do a queue. And for the queue, I used to recommend using the multiple people jig, but it's come to my attention that they are tracking your IP addresses despite having unique IDs when you open up multiple Chrome users. So for this, I'm gonna recommend that you use multiple different devices all on long-term evolution. Basically, just turn off your Wi-Fi. Hence, you will have different gateways for each individual one. It's like having different IP addresses, or you could even set up VPNs on each of your computers if you want to do that as well. And honestly, guys, you can only focus on so many releases at 10 a.m. Eastern time. There's gonna be so many happening. Like, it's really, like, this is ridiculous. There's a lot of stock for these shoes, but those were essentially my favorite stores. Those are the ones I would personally focus on, but there's gonna be much more stores releasing these. Like, I know Jimmy Jazz always gets them, City Gear, Wrong Weather, there's Shoe Palace. All these stores will definitely be getting them, but I honestly would focus on the other ones. But, you know, it's up to you. If you want to focus on some other stores, that's personal preference. Now, also, there are supposed to be some 3 a.m. Eastern time releases, and I'm going to be talking more about the 3 a.m. Eastern time releases when I make my video on the time management. If you guys recall, I made that video a while ago when the Off-White Vapor Maxes were releasing, then we also had the Yeezys releasing, then we had a bunch of shoes all releasing on the same day. So I made that video essentially just to encompass how you should manage your time, and I'll be talking more about the 3 a.m. releases in that video. Right now though, there's not much info on them. So with all the online stores out of the way, let's jump into some raffles right now. So basically, I'm going to start this off by explaining how to get multiple entries onto sneakers and stuff, and we're going to refer back to that when I talk about the other raffles. Now, I understand a lot of you guys already know how to get multiple entries who've been on the channel for a while, but I'm trying to look out for the new guys as well. So for you pros, the experts on this channel who already know how to make multiple entries, I'm going to leave a time right up here that you could skip to, but this is only if you're a pro. If you really don't know how to get multiple entries and you want to do it as safe as possible without the algorithm catching you, definitely stick around. Alright, so like I said, we'll be using SNS as a reference point. So the first thing I'm going to mention, just for SNS and any raffle that gives you this option, whenever you have the option to pick up in-store or choose online, if you're within driving range, within the vicinity of these stores, I would recommend going for the in-store releases in comparison to the online releases, just because there's going to be far less competition when it comes to the in-store releases. Okay, so now getting into the information. When it comes to your email address, normally I would recommend using the +1/+2 jig for your email address, where essentially you just add a +1, or it could be a +50, +1000, there's no cap, right before the @gmail.com, and all the emails will go to that main account, but the algorithm sees it as different emails. For sneakers and stuff, and for most of the raffles that I'm going to be mentioning, I'll say otherwise if it changes, but I'm actually going to recommend that you do use authentic email addresses, just because SNS is a little more strict. And also, you are going to need payment methods for this, so it's not like you're going to be making 100 different entries on sneakers and stuff. Anyway, moving on, for the phone number, put a random phone number. There's no verification process through this, but I would recommend choosing a realistic area code. Moving on to the address, there's two things you should be doing. First of all, when you have the last word in your address, whether it be road or street, you should change the characters up a little, making it maybe ST or ST dot, spelling street wrong, stuff like that. And then the other thing you should try, if you live in a house, this won't work if you live in an apartment, but if you live in a house, go on to address line 2 and type in 1A or 1B, it could be 2D, anything like that, so it looks like it's a different apartment. And finally, sneakers and stuff, and one other raffle that we'll be discussing does require payment, unfortunately. So this means you're either going to have to borrow your wife's PayPal information, maybe her credit card, or maybe your parents' credit card info, or what you could actually do is check out privacy.com. That's a site that I've been using to make different credit card numbers. And finally, after this, I always recommend clearing your cookies. We talked about this on adidas.com. I only recommend this just to be safe. Moving on to the next raffle, we have End Clothing. End Clothing, the only difference is going to be you're going to use all the same tips that I mentioned for the information on SNS, but you're going to have to implement that onto an account for End Clothing. You're going to have to add the address onto that account. And the same thing goes for new payment methods for End Clothing. Moving on to the next raffle, we have Subtype, and Subtype is a golden raffle. The reason I say this is because you can actually use the email jig for this one, and they require so little information. You could just make so many entries. So whenever you have spare time in the day, I would definitely recommend just making a couple of entries into Subtype. And the same exact thing goes for the next raffle, which is A Place. The only difference with this is that it's a different format, being that this is in a Google Forms, but it's going to be the same idea with the info. Then the Browns raffle is very similar to SNS. You don't need payment, luckily, but you do need to do stuff with an Instagram account. Whenever it comes to Instagram accounts, I never recommend using fake ones. I always recommend having a friend do it for you with their Instagram account. And also for Browns, it is UK only, unfortunately. So shout out to all my guys in the UK. Moving on to the next raffle, we have Avenue, and Avenue is very similar to End Clothing, where you're going to have to make accounts. The only difference is that you will have to add the shoe to your wish list to be entered into the raffle. Next raffle is City Gear, and City Gear is just like sneakers and stuff. However, you don't need a payment method, luckily. Moving on, we have North Store, and North Store is just like End Clothing, where you're going to have to implement all that information into an account. And finally, the last raffle that I found for you guys is Sucinco, and Sucinco is just a wonderful raffle because you can use the email jig for this one. They don't really need a lot of information, but you do need an Instagram account, unfortunately. Now, I am expecting more raffles to pop up, but this is a very good starting point, obviously. And all the links for raffles are always going to be on my Twitter, which is KeithAdam10. So, with all the raffles out of the way, let's start talking about the apps now. So, first of all, I want to give a brief reminder to anyone who hasn't already signed up for Adidas Confirmed if you're on the East Coast. Or you can also just be in the zone where you spoof your location. You could do it that way as well. And next up, we have the Foot apps, which is like the Foot Locker, the Champs, the Foot Action Raffle. I understand that a lot of you guys do need those extra minute head starts. I'm going to try my best to tweet those out for you guys when I head to the mall. But I definitely would recommend following FTL codes on Twitter, just because they tweet out all the zip codes you need with the correlating PIN numbers for them. So I would recommend giving them a follow. I think that they're a fantastic source for this. And finally, the last thing I wanted to mention was the Finish Line app. The Finish Line app is doing a release at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Last thing I wanted to mention, if you are in a location where there's not a lot of stores near you, or you simply just don't know what stores are near you, definitely head on to adidas.com on the Yeezy page and click on store list. You can scroll down the entire store list and check for your country, see what consortium stores are getting them in your country. So that'll conclude today's video. If you guys enjoyed, or if you perhaps learned a thing or two, feel free to leave a like. That would mean a lot. Also, guys, if you're new, make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications so you stay 100% updated on all these sneaker releases that are coming out. But with that, I'll leave you guys. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later.